Hi everyone, this is Mindy and welcome back. In today's video, I'm creating this elegant Christmas card using the elegant floral frames, and I'm also going to show you how to fix mistakes because they do happen along the way. The sets that I'm going to be using today is the Home for the Holidays stamp set. I really liked the sentiments on this. I also have the Winter Prism die set, the Elegant Floral Frames stencil, and then also the Elegant Floral Frames stamp and die. The first thing that I'm going to do is heat emboss. So I chose the image on here that has this kind of half circle frame with the florals on it. I'm placing this onto some smooth white cardstock, and I also have the topper for my ornament. Now, there is a solid piece of the stamp inside of that frame, and sometimes there can be a bubble on there. And if it's a bubble, then you could transfer ink. So what I do is lift that up just a little bit and kind of press out that bubble. I prepped the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, and then I'm stamping this down onto my white cardstock using the Honeybee Stamps Embossing Ink. Then I'm going to take this over to some scratch paper and I'm going to sprinkle on the Brutus Monroe Gilded Gold Embossing Powder. And I'm going to just kind of tap it to make sure it settles in to all of that ink. This embossing powder is going to stick to that embossing ink, tap off the excess, and then once my heat tool is nice and warmed up, I'm going to bring that to the back of my cardstock, kind of make a quick swipe, and then bring it to the front to melt this so it's nice and gold and shiny. After this has cooled off, I am going to trim off the ornament piece, the topper, because I don't need that right now. I just need this frame to do my ink blending. I'm folding up a piece of tape and I'm going to place that behind my cardstock so that it can stick down to my work surface. And now for the stencil, there are 3 layers and they are labeled at the very top there under my finger, flowers 1, 2, and then the leaves. So I brought in the first stencil. I'm lining that up over my embossed image, and I'm going to hold this down with Post-it tape. And I just make sure that that tape touches the stencil, my tabletop, and the cardstock. I'm going to start by ink blending these flowers with Festive Berries Distress Ink and using a blending brush. I tap off a lot off on the side and then bringing it in just really light-handed because Distress ink can be really bold and in your face. I'd rather start lighter. Now with embossing or with my image embossed, it's going to resist any ink. Now this is tip number 1. I would suggest wiping away that excess ink now while the stencil is still on there, and you'll see why in a little bit. Now I wanted to add just a little bit more detail and contrast to my flower, so I brought in aged mahogany with a small blending tool and just adding that to the center of my large flower and a little bit to the ends of the other flowers. Then I'm going to carefully peel this up and I'm going to place in the flowers number 2 stencil. I'm also going to kind of mask off those smaller areas. I'm going to make those green. But for this one, I'm going to use the leftover ink on my blending brush, which is that Festive Berries, just kind of starting in light-handed and building up that color as I go, and then bringing in that aged mahogany. And I'm just picking up the ink that was left over on my work surface. I moved my Post-it tape and placed it over the flower I just blended. And over here on these flowers, I'm bringing in bundled sage and just lightly going over those areas. So it looks like there's some greenery there on those flowers. Now I'm bringing in the 3rd layer of the stencil, which is the rest of the leaves. And I'm just going over that with that same bundled sage, whatever is left on my brush, just kind of really light-handed. Then I'm going to bring in peeled paint. And I'm going to kind of go over those areas a little bit more just to kind of highlight and add some contrast. Now the stencil covers one of the leaves, but I didn't see an opening for that other leaf. So instead, I kind of took that same leaf and I just shifted it and it kind of fits. I masked off the areas around it so I didn't transfer any ink, but you're going to notice that there are 2 white gaps down there. And what I did off screen afterwards was I found a Copic marker that kind of matched that color and filled in the areas so I got that complete leaf covered. Now here's one of my mistakes. I went through and buffed off the excess ink with a paper towel. What is happening when I did that was I smeared my ink on my cardstock. But I do have a fix for that. Now I lined up the coordinating dies and cut everything out, and then problem number 2 was somehow I had ink on my cutting plates, which transferred little red speckles onto my white ornament. So I have a fix for that too. In the meantime, I am taking the Winter Prism. This is a 3-piece die set, and I cut all of those layers from just some white cardstock. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have maybe done red because I was really feeling that white and red combination, but this one is just going all in red. They line up together to create beautiful dimension behind my ornament. So it's still some subtle interest, but it's keeping the focus on my ornament, which is going to also have my sentiment. Now I want to give you a closer look. It still might be hard to see, but there are little red speckles on the inside, which really bummed me out. And I really loved my flower and I didn't want to redo it. So here's my fix. I used the other die in the set to cut out that centerpiece. And I cut it out again. You can see I have an image stamped in light gray. And then I have 3 layers of just that base piece that I cut from white cardstock. So I am going to layer these 3 pieces together using liquid glue. Now I apologize, my little sprouts of hair and my glasses are getting in the way once in a while. I apologize for that. But I'm just layering these up. I really needed to get my head in there so I could make sure everything was lined up perfectly. And this adds some beautiful dimension to my ornament here. Now I also took liquid glue and added it behind each of the panels and secured that down to white cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I can move on to my sentiment. I really loved this Happy Holidays. So here are some more things I needed to fix. So I placed this in my Misti and I'm stamping that Happy Holidays down in the corner with some intense black ink. But after I stamped it, I noticed that the word holidays was not very straight. That was kind of driving me crazy. I'm not sure what happened, if this is a one-off on my stamp set, but the holidays was kind of crooked no matter how I turned my paper. So I went back, picked a different sentiment, one that's a little bit larger, and I'm stamping that down onto some scratch white cardstock. Then I'm using the coordinating die to die cut it out, and that is going to fit over that stamped area perfectly. It wasn't the original sentiment I wanted, but it is a fix that's going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and add my ornament to the front of the card using some liquid glue, and I'm going to place something heavy on it for a few minutes to let that really sit. And for my sentiment and also the ornament topper, I am placing some foam squares behind. Some of the areas are a little skinny, so I just trimmed these small foam squares in half to fit behind those areas and my ornament topper. I removed the backing of the foam squares and added my sentiment over top of the misstamped one. And then I have removed the backing of the foam squares for my ornament topper and just added a little bit of glue to the bottom part so it attaches to my frame. Now to fix that ink that was kind of smeared off, I just went over that area with a white gel pen. And then I trimmed off the rest of my ornament topper that was hanging off the top of the card. So while not everything went according to plan, I am really happy with how this card turned out. And I think this is a gorgeous image and makes some beautiful Christmas cards. I hope you found inspiration in today's video and maybe some tips on how to fix any mistakes that happen along the way. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.